images added to a web page make it more visually appealing and also can provide some additional information to the text information that you have on your page. Images can be downloaded into your project and added to your page directly, or can be referenced through a URL to another web server that has an image that you'd like to include on your page. To start, let's download a couple of images to add to our test page here. I'm going to go to Google. I'm going to make this a little bigger for right now and click on images. There are a lot of websites that provide images that are free or for some minimal cost. There are a lot of free ones, so you do not need to be paying money for any images for this class. So on the Google Images site, then we can just search for a subject we're interested in. So I'm going to search for cityscapes, and I see a lot of images here, and I see some categories which are kind of interesting. Now, because this video is going to be on YouTube and in our textbook, there's one more thing I'm going to do. You don't necessarily have to do this unless you are looking for pictures that you want to post publicly on a website. And that is, make sure that the user rights allow you to use the image so that you don't have any legal issues. In CS-102, you do not need to worry about that. But if you are making web pages elsewhere, you may want to be aware of that you may have to pay for the right to have images on your website. To ensure that I don't have to worry about that, on the Google page, I select user rights and choose the Creative Commons license. And now this is showing me just images, or filtering on just images that are free for me to use. Still cityscapes, and I think I'm going to check out this futuristic cityscapes. Let me double check. Google may have, nope, it reset that. So I'm going to go back to the Creative Commons. Okay, so I can see that up here. So now these are all pretty safe for me to use and not worry about getting in trouble on YouTube, or if someone sees it on the textbook website. So some really interesting pictures. There's a couple things we can do. We can put pictures into the document. We can also add pictures, a picture as a background instead of the color, actually have an image. We'll talk more about the background image shortly, but I'm going to grab a couple of these cool images and I'm going to click on it, and then I'm going to right click. I notice it's a very large picture, but we're going to be able to resize that. So 4,200 by 2,000, that's a pretty big image. But looking at it here, I'm going to right click and save image as, and then I'm going to put it in with my project. Now I'm going to rename it just to make things easier for me in this demonstration. So I'm putting it here in the same folder with my other web files. So I'm going to save it, and we should see it appear here. There it is. Let me grab a couple more. Let's see here. I'm going to close this preview. Oh, that's pretty cool. Save image as. There's a lot of save and copy options here. Save image as, and I'm going to rename this one to image or a pic 2, and I'll grab one more. Oh, that looks really cool. Okay, there is my third one, and I will call it pic 3. Okay, so they're all downloaded on my computer. So if whoever owns these pictures were to delete them or change their names, it's not going to affect my website any. When we get to connecting and referencing other pictures on other websites, that could be a problem, but we're safe here because we have the images downloaded onto our computer and in the same folder as our index and our style sheets here. So we can see that we have 3 pictures here. I'm going to rename this one. JPEG and JPEG are the same type. JPEG, I believe, is older or maybe a different format, but pretty sure I would have a typo with that one when I go to add these pictures in, because I would forget that E. So now they are all the same type and they are the same name. So now I'm going to add them to the page. So let's switch back to our page. Let's give ourselves a little bit more room here. And I will start with the image tag. And there are two properties to the image tag. The first one is SRC, or source, and that is where we put in the file name. Now the file is in the same directory as our HTML file here, so I can just do /, and then we'll start with pick1 dot JPG. Now it's important that the case match exactly the case on the file name. And if you cannot see the extension here, you'll need to go back to our week 1 information to make sure and turn on extensions so you can see them, because this is where we can run into problems where images don't work, and it's because maybe we can't see something, or we type something in here that's a little off. Even just having a capital P here on some operating systems will break the image. In fact, let's start there. Let's see what happens if I say I put the wrong name in here. Okay, so I'm going to intentionally do that, and we'll see what happens on the web page. So I have my source there, and there's one more piece to an image, one more property, and that is alt. And this provides some additional information for screen readers or for search engines that might come across your web page and want to catalog the image on your page with the text that you provide, so that other people later on searching those keywords may be shown your web page or the picture on your web page because you took the time to fill in alt. In addition, people that have screen readers built into their web browsers that read the text to them, if they have trouble reading it themselves, will read the text you put in here. So do try to be descriptive. So I'm going to put something that describes in a short sentence that picture. And I am all done. There is no closing tag on a source. It's one of the few that we'll be using in our class that does not have a closing tag. So when I save this, then we can see that the alt text appeared, but the picture did not appear, and that's because I have a typo here. So if I fix the typo and save again, then we get the picture. Now, I mentioned when I was downloading these pictures, some of them were quite large. Well, this one is extremely large. We can just barely see just a little bit of it. And we can scroll down. It is taking up a lot of the space. So let's fix that. And we're going to do this in CSS. And we're going to add a new section here. And I'm going to modify the width property. And I'm going to set it to, let's try 500 pixels. Pixel is a single dot on the screen. Now this, we saw numbers like 4,000 by 2,000. So the image downloaded has 4,000 pixels across from left to right per row and 2,000 rows. So it's a very dense picture. It's got a lot of real fine detail in it. But on our web page, that is not going to work. So we're going to size it down, and we're going to say take those 4,000 plus pixels across and compress them down to only 500 pixels. So we're cutting them about 8, making about 8 times smaller than the original. Okay. So when I save this, we see the picture resizes. Now, a lot of the pixels from the original image are gone. They've been compressed out, but it still looks amazing, and we can see the whole thing. So we could play around with that Maybe it's still a little too big, so I can make it a little smaller. Okay, I like that. That looks good. Okay, so I've got my image here. Let's add the two others. And I'm just going to copy this. And I think now you see why I named them all very similar. Makes it very easy to do this. And I will change this a little bit. And might as well be consistent. So there, I've got my three images in, and I should see them all on the page. They are all going to be resized to 400 pixels width. Save. And that is the wrong one. Save, there we go, and we can see that they all lined up here. Now, there's no information about where on the page these images should appear other than the order that I have them here in the body. And you'll notice if I stretch this out, the browser is starting to make some placement decisions on its own. It wants to put them next to each other if it can, and I can't make my browser any bigger here in the split mode. But if I make the images quite a bit smaller, let's cut them in half again, we're going to see that they line up side by side and there. So the browser wants to just go left to right and scrunch them all together. Now we can change that behavior, and the way to do that with pictures as well as other elements is to put a div tag, which is just a division. It's just a placeholder that you won't see on the screen, but is just something that tells the browser everything inside this div open and closing bracket, that all goes on one line and nothing else. It allows you to control a little bit of the placement decisions that the browser's making. So if I add a div here and I move this div down below the first image and save, we can see the first image is all by itself and the browser is not putting anything else up there. These two are together, so we can do the same thing to each one of those and put a div around them. See that the VS Code is helping here. Okay, and then we'll put one more around this last one, an opening div, and then put the closing div in. Okay, so with that now, each picture is in its own section and it's isolated from one another. What is interesting is the pictures are still different heights. They are because we set them to 200, or I guess I could go back up to 400 now. They are still 400 pixels each. They're all being compressed a little different to be 400 pixels across, but you can see it here. They are still different heights, but it's not as noticeable. When they're side by side, it's really easy to tell that. So that is a nice trick to spread them out a little bit using divs so that it's not so obvious that the pictures are a little bit different. Now, I did not put a height in here, and that is because I wanted the browser to decide on the height for each one of the images individually, because they are all three different sizes a little bit. So when the browser sees the image tag here in the CSS, it sees that I've set the width to 400 for each picture that it renders. It compresses it to make it 400 pixels across, and just make sure that the height is proportional to what the original one is, so it doesn't look scrunched or it doesn't get weird. If it can be either scrunched or stretched. If I do add a height in here, and let's say I want to make them all, let's say 600 pixels, then what we're going to see, now I've taken the decision away from the browser, and now we can see that they're all going to be exactly the same height and width, but their proportions have changed. They've gotten stretched out. They actually don't look too bad. This one looks a little bad, but they still look kind of cool. But that I want it to look like the original, so I'm going to remove the height and let the browser do the height part for me. So there, that looks much nicer. And I mentioned at the start that we can add an image to the background. Now we've got a color set, and when I add an image here in the body, that the blue or the light blue will still be there, but an image is going to be placed over the top of it. Let me do a couple of things, just one thing to prepare for this. I'm going to make this smaller so we can see more of the background. Now, I already downloaded a couple of images, and one nice thing about VS Code is that we can see the images here. I have them open, so we can get a preview, another very cool futuristic cityscape. So we can take a look at them here right in the browser, so that's pretty cool. And then I've got another one, not futuristic, but one thing that I like about this picture is it's very pale. And since I'm considering it for a background, that's important. The background is just kind of should be just a subtle thing that really doesn't distract from the text and the images and all the other important things on your website. So if I were to put a picture like this, which has some very bold colors, contrast from really dark blues to almost whites, as a background behind all the text, all the images, it's going to dominate the picture and really distract. It's going to make it harder for the user to find and look at the information without being distracted by the background. So I'll show you what I mean by that. I'll put this picture in first, or this image in first, and we'll just see what it looks like. But ultimately, we're going to end up putting this one in because it's pale. It's not going to be as distracting. It still is kind of contrasty. There's some pretty dark blacks here and some pretty light colors here in the sky, but it is nicer. So let's go here, and we can leave the color in or we can remove it. It's going to be hidden from us once we do this. So I'm going to choose background image, and then I have to use the URL instruction here to tell the browser that this is a file, and then I'm going to include the bg.jpg in quotes, which I forgot to do. Okay, so with that, when I save, we're going to see that become the background. Okay, so that's interesting. The images are bold, the background is bold. You lose track of text on the screen. If there were other headers and paragraphs, it would be hard to read this. So avoid really dark or really heavy-duty images. Let me change this to the other image we were looking at, and that's WebP. Now, I misspelled it, so the browser just did nothing. Fortunately, we still have the background there, so it went with the background color and there's no image. So let me fix my misspelling, and there we go. So now we have the background image. I'll stretch this out a little bit so we can see more. It's subtle. It's not big enough to fill the whole area here, so it starts to tile itself over to the side and down a little bit. We can fix that a little bit. Give us more room to work here a little bit with another property we can put here. And that is background size. And so we've got quite a few options, a lot of things that have numbers and units of measure in them. Cover is the one we're interested in, and that's just going to tell the browser to try to spread this out a little bit. When I save it, you can see it covered all the way across. The browser is tall enough that it had to tile a second one down below. So if I were to maybe make this a little bit shorter, then it would look a little bit nicer. But it's still the background images can be tough because they do need to be matched or really highly configured in CSS to work on the size of page and the content that you have. Not only their look, but also their size and how they can be arranged on the page so that they don't distract. Having this start of the second tile down here is a little distracting in this example. And one last note here, we are applying the image to background. We can also do that with other things like paragraphs and headers and things like that, both a color or an image. I would not recommend doing an image because it will be just a little bit, it'll be a sliver of itself or end up tiled heavily across the characters in your header. But you can do that. Any changes that I make here that don't start with background in the body section will affect everything. So I can set the opacity, which is to make things more or less transparent. I can set that to lighten this up even more, but it will also apply itself to all the text, all the images, everything here in the body will also get lightened up, so everything can get pale really quick. So just be aware of that as you're styling your assignments. And one last thing, so far we've worked with pictures that we've downloaded and have in our project. You can also include pictures that are on other websites as long as you have the full URL, the address, the web server, the folder structure to get down to it. So while you are searching through pictures rather than downloading, you can copy an image link, and that should give you a link to wherever this image is stored. I found one earlier that I used in the textbook, and I'm going to include that here. So I'm going to switch back here to our preview. I'm going to get rid of 2 of these pictures. I'll leave them in the div. I don't think it will be necessary, but I will leave them there. And in the source, I just put the full URL of the image. So this is an HTTPS. There's a website here, staticflickr.com, and then there's a folder and a file name with a JPG, and that is the image that I want to put here. The image is different, so I would change the alternate text. And when I save this, we see the image there. Now, the image is still being styled by this, so let me make it bigger. And so here is the image that is being downloaded each time this page is loaded. The web browser then goes to this website and copies this image down. Now, the browser does some caching and things to speed that up, so it doesn't do it every single time, but each time someone new looks at this web page, this image is going to be downloaded to be displayed here.